70% in Uganda by 2024. Now, Dr. Akankwasa, the NEMA Executive Director, was giving us a background, and right about now, we are going to continue getting more information on how we manage mercury in Uganda and what is the way forward. Doctor, I'll come back to you to give us more on the way forward and what is the plan.
Yes, thank you very much. The plan is to get rid of mercury from Uganda by 2030, because science indicates that the body actually does not benefit, the human body does not benefit from mercury. Mercury can become toxic to a human being at very, very minimal quantities, as low as 0.1 microgram. So, because we do not have many benefits to human health and environment from mercury, the way forward should be to phase out mercury from our economy. One, by not doing primary mining of mercury from the environment, because if we do not mine it from environment, it will stay there. And then addressing anthropogenic or human-induced mercury pollution, which is largely coming from our activities. Globally, coal generation of power is the leading cause of mercury pollution in the environment. But at local level, we have heard that artisanal mining is our biggest contributor as a country, because we don't have coal energy production in Uganda. But we can also release mercury from incineration, for example, or open burning of materials. Like I said, there are several materials that have mercury which you will not know. Small cells, batteries, etc., etc., paint. So it's not wise to burn solid waste in open air. And also it's not wise to discharge effluent from industries, because industries do produce mercury also. Boilers from industries release mercury in the atmosphere, but also effluent from production processes can have mercury going into our water bodies. And so our clarion call to producers or industries is to prevent water pollution, and our clarion call to our citizens is to protect wetlands, because these wetlands will create our buffer for the lakes. The Minamata problem came because the waste was going direct into the water, fish was picking it, and fish has a natural capacity to magnify, to bioconcentrate mercury. Fish can take in small quantities of mercury, but fish has a mechanism to amplify that small quantities to become bigger quantities, which become toxic to the human to human health. So we need to be careful with what we release in our lakes, in our rivers, because fish has a capacity to catch very minimal quantities of mercury and magnify it. And so our wetlands are our natural buffer for our rivers, but also proper management of industrial waste, avoiding open air burning and burning things in professionally designed incinerators, and then convincing our artisanal miners to abandon use of mercury in gold mining.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akankwasa, for that thorough background in mercury management in Uganda. Right about now, I want to cross over to Ms. Anne Nakafero, Senior District Support Officer, NEMA, to further expound on the concern with mercury.
Thank you, Mr. Edrisi. Not until 2018, as my executive director has alluded to, did we realize that actually mercury pollution is taking place silently. This was when we undertook the Minamata initial assessments with the support from development partners. It revealed that over 60% of the emissions in Uganda related to mercury are coming from the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector. But also we have the other percentage coming from mercury-added products These are products that include lighting, bulbs, the batteries that have earlier been mentioned, of course at the disposal stage when they are broken, the non-electric measuring devices, the barometers, thermometers, the pressure gauges, but also from the manufacturing processes where mercury is used as a catalyst, including manufacture of cement. I just want to emphasize that manufacturing cement requires the raw material, which is limestone, and it contains mercury as a heavy metal, among others. But because of the existing pollution abatement strategies in industries, somehow mercury can escape into the air as flue gas. So this showed us that actually mercury pollution is taking place. From an open burning of waste alone, about 5,000 kilograms of mercury are released annually. From dental amalgam, about 150 kilograms of mercury are released annually. So, as NEMA, on behalf of government of Uganda, we spearheaded the ratification of the Minamata Convention. But it also revealed that management of mercury calls for a sectoral approach, also involving private sector, to address the entire mercury product cycle. Mercury mining in Uganda is not taking place because probably initially we didn't interest ourselves, or we haven't discovered the deposits. But when we compare the experiences in other countries where mercury pollution has taken place, when we ratified the convention, it made a stop on any attempts to mine mercury, even if it is discovered. But also it called for sectors or parties and countries to put in place measures to control the supply and trade of mercury, to set limitations on emissions of mercury from industries, including waste incineration. But I should also point out that naturally mercury occurs, especially through volcanic eruptions. It is emitted to the air, and once it is emitted, part of it settles back, is absorbed by the soil, and then finds its way into the plants. So there are emissions and re-emissions naturally. Therefore, that everybody to some extent is exposed to mercury pollution from natural sources. However, the situation is worsened when we try to repackage it or undertake activities that now expose us more to these emissions. Yes, so it is important that sectors are brought together, and not only government sectors, even private sector, to see how we can work together. Mr. Edrisi, I wish to emphasize that mercury exists in different forms. So unlike other metals, it is very difficult to handle. Once you extract it from nature, you cannot change it into a usable form. And if you did so, once it is disposed of, you have to stabilize it to take it back into the natural form. So you cannot destroy it. And because of that, it mutates into different forms. We have the elemental one, which is the liquid mercury. We have the organic one, which is very toxic, which my executive director has talked about. This usually, when it finds itself in the water bodies, it is taken up by plants, fish, then it joins the food chain. We have the organic one, which we are exposed to during our work in our workplaces, for instance, in the industries and all those processes. Now, the long-term exposure to mercury, but depending on how you are exposed to it, whether through ingestion, through your skin, through breathing it in, will determine how toxic it will be to you. Now, just very small amounts of mercury exposed to a human being for a long time will result they will affect the nervous system. Then in the short run, the kidney will be affected. And that is when you're exposed to small amounts. But in a short term, if you're exposed to high levels, then they are likely to damage the brain, the kidney, and more so to the fetuses. And it affects the development of the newborn child if they were affected during the womb of their mothers. So this was of great concern to us, and moreover, the treatment of mercury is not yet formal. Once you are contaminated with it, you need to be subjected to chelation, something which relates to taking drugs or injection to remove it out of your body. But the protocol is not yet approved by WHO. So this is a major key concern to us. And we wanted to address every stage or product cycle of mercury, from the point of entry into Uganda, from the point of handling, usage, and disposal. But now it is very costly to take mercury out of the environment. You would rather settle for alternatives, and as you phase down their usage, the use of products where alternatives do not do what? Exist. Yes, so because of that, we are working together with different sectors here and those that are not here to see how we put efforts together to address that concern. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anne, for that wonderful presentation. Right about now, I want to cross over to Ms. Patience Nsereko, Principal Environment Inspector, NEMA, to break down what are some of the actions that have been taken by NEMA to curb this challenge.
Thank you very much. So the challenges have been highlighted by my ED and Anne. First of all, we have the National Environment Act 2019 was revised to incorporate, among others, aspects to do with regulating the handling and use and disposal of mercury contaminated substances. Also speaking to products that may contain mercury. So the law has been revised to speak to that. But secondly, we are now drafting regulation that is relating to industrial chemicals. That's one gap that we've had. The agriculture sector has been regulated, drugs have been regulated, but there's a gap in industrial chemicals, and that's where mercury, for instance, Anne mentioned, is used as a catalyst in industrial processes or even intentionally added to facilitate industrial processes. So the regulation we are drafting also speaks a bit to in relation to mercury, use of mercury in such processes. The ED alluded to the Mining Act, which has already taken into account restricting, controlling the use, stopping the use of mercury in the artisanal mining sector. But also we are working with industry to help them identify certain processes which could probably have alternatives. The industry sometimes are not aware of some of these alternatives that would work as good as the products that they're using. So this is also some of the things that we are taking into account. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Patience Nsereko, for highlighting some of the actions taken. But to go further into the same line of questioning, what are some of the challenges that are still remaining in implementing these actions?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, many times, even when laws are set and put in place, like the National Environment Act is in place, there are challenges in ensuring that there is compliance. So we really have to do a lot more to ensure compliance with the law. If you go to the artisanal mining sector, for instance, it's a challenge trying to get the miners off the use of mercury. Secondly, you'll find that where industrial processes have been designed to use mercury as a catalyst, it may take some time for them to adopt other alternatives and get off the use of mercury. Of course, there is awareness. We've tried to do a lot of awareness, but some people still do not appreciate the problem. If you go to the artisanal miners, for example, they still consider mercury as the best option. And yet severally we've informed them that there are different alternatives or methods to use to extract gold from the materials. So those are some of the challenges that we're still facing, and we continually try to address them.
Thank you so much for that wonderful report, Ms. Patience Nsereko. If you have just joined us, we are talking about mercury management in Uganda. And if you want to be part of the conversation, the hashtag is Mercury Management in Uganda. Go to our Twitter pages or Facebook and share your views. It could be a question, it could be a comment. Share your views because they are important in moving us forward in this discussion. Now, I want to cross over to Mr. Wilbur Bukosi, the Customs Officer, Uganda Revenue Authority, to talk about mercury management in healthcare, home care, and education sectors by URA Customs.
Thank you, Mr. Segawa, and viewers. I'll speak on behalf of Customs, especially the fact that we are involved in international trade. We facilitate trade, and mercury is one of the items that is imported into this country through different border stations or gazetted through the gazetted border stations. But the fact is that mercury is imported usually in very, very tiny quantities, and it quite often has a challenge. It may escape the eye of the customs officer. It's just a small bottle someone can put in the pocket and goes through
our system. However, for the products that contain mercury, we've taken serious actions, and of course backed by the law. The fact that the current East African Customs Management Act, under Section 18 of the Act, empowers all these items or cosmetics and soaps that contain mercury as prohibited items, and we have more than often, if you followed the media, intercepted several quantities of soaps and cosmetics. Actually, over the last 2 weeks, I think we intercepted about 3 metric tons of cosmetics that contain mercury and also another chemical called hydroquinone. And in that way, we are trying to curb the trade of illicit items which contain mercury. Then also we've ensured that our gazetted border points are under effective intelligence systems whereby we can always identify or follow up cases whereby any illicit importations that come in, we take control of them. And of course, we also have certain other challenges, like if, for instance, if any items are being declared to customs, like soaps, the current system, what you call classification or HS codes, does not categorize that maybe this soap or this cosmetic does have mercury or not. So it becomes also tight or difficult for us to identify. I mean, we always operate an online system. You make a declaration to customs. Now, for instance, you may declare soap as normal soap, but in actual sense, the soap may contain mercury. So at times that becomes a challenge to us. Of course, matters are not made any better that some countries around us are not signatories to the Minamata Convention. For them, they do import these items which contain mercury. So while the goods are going through our country, being a transit route, they can easily end up on the local market, and that is also a challenge. But of course, we are stepping out the intelligence system, Bioenforcement Department, with targeted surveillance to ensure that no diversions happen. Now, of course, you also realize that mercury is a chemical, and analysis requires analysis. I mean, you require equipment to determine whether it is mercury or not. And indeed, these are some of the equipment that are lacking, and probably also there is need to sensitize both customs officers and the public on how to identify mercury or mercury-added products. And of course, we also have issues of declarations that could be made, but instead of declaring something that is mercury, it's declared something else. So it could easily slip through, and we fail to identify it. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I'll move to Geoffrey Moses Munyegera, Standards Officer, Uganda National Bureau of Standards. As UNBS, what are you doing towards curbing the pollution of mercury in the country?
Thank you, moderator.
As UNBS, we are doing a surveillance. We have a surveillance team that is moving within our markets to look around and see inspect these goods on the market and identify those that have the mercury and the other things that we are regulating. 2, we instituted a pivot program whereby the imports coming in, we appointed service providers that are doing the verification of the goods. They issue them with certificate of conformity. If they are found fit to come to the Ugandan market. And so that program has helped so much. 3, the import inspection scheme is on also, which is looking at every import that is coming into the country at the entry points. Here we are working with the customs, and so it is helping a lot on this. Then we have a product certification scheme. Most of the standards that we are developing as UNBS on the issue of mercury are compulsory standards. And therefore, every product covered there is supposed to have a certification mark. And therefore, we are moving on locally into the manufacturers around to inspect, to test, and see really, to verify those products. And then if they are fitting, we issue them a certification mark, which becomes an assurance to the consumers. Thank you.
What are some of the challenges that you're facing in implementing these actions?
As UNBS, we have a challenge of the limited testing capacities in our lab, specifically on the mercury ingredient. Right now, our machine that tests, verifies the mercury in these products is down, but within a month or 2, it will be up and running again. So we have the cross borders where these goods are coming into unnoticed, just as customs has highlighted on that. Then the other ones, of course, the limited the human resource, whereby, for instance, our surveillance teams cannot cover the whole country, cannot look into every product coming in because we are so few. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to move to Dr. Moses Akampira, Senior Regulatory Officer.
The National Drug Authority, we've had panelists here mention that one of the consumers of mercury is the sector of medicine through thermometers and other cosmetics. You at National Drug Authority, what are some of the actions that you've taken towards eliminating mercury pollution in the country?
Thank you very much. I'd like to say that the concerns of mercury started very many years ago in the 30s. One, there was a concern on the concern of amalgam has been there, dental amalgam. There were concerns on vaccine preservatives that use mercury, potentially being harmful. And there have been efforts by the National Drug Authority to move towards phasing out mercury in dental amalgam. In 2019, the National Drug Authority approved a regulation on registration of surgical instruments and appliances. And in that regulation, all surgical instruments, of which dental amalgam is one of them, have to undergo registration prior to being used in the country. And certainly, mercury composition of dental amalgam is one of the things that is going to be really taken into consideration to control mercury usage in dental practice. And of course, gradual phase down and eventually discontinuation. Regarding vaccines, there is also effort to phase down usage of thiomazole as a preservative. There are very few vaccines currently which still use thiomazole, but yes, it's still in use in some cases, but in concentrations of about 0.003% to about 0.001%. And also in terms of waste management, our colleagues from NEMA have mentioned there's a problem with waste management. And NDA is collaborating with NEMA to approve facilities which are accredited for managing pharmaceutical waste. So all waste that originates from the pharmaceutical sector has to be disposed of with supervision from National Drug Authority at a facility which is accredited by our colleagues from NEMA. And in addition to that, there are potential risks of improper manufacturing of drugs, where you find that a particular drug is not supposed to contain mercury, but because it is manufactured in a contaminated environment, it could contain mercury content that could be harmful. So in terms of controlling the contents of medicines, we have an intervention which was established in 2014, the regulation on registration of drugs. So all drugs that are allowed in the market have to undergo a comprehensive assessment of their contents, which include impurity determination. So mercury is one of them, and in general heavy metals. And we also follow up when these drugs are coming into the country. We carry out import control, we do market surveillance, and lately we have acquired a very important technology in our laboratory, which is WHO pre-qualified for testing of medicines. We have acquired a technology known as plasma mass spectrometry, which is able to detect heavy metals, including mercury, at very low concentrations in the range of parts per billion. That's about, you're looking at a microgram in a liter range. And that would be very helpful, not only in determining concentrations of impurity of mercury, but also other heavy metals that could be harmful. Yeah, that's all from me.
Any more challenges that you're facing as National Drug Authority?
Yes,
in
there are
terms of
challenges
mercury management?
In regard to border control, because we have such a huge border coverage, but our presence is still limited to a few of the borders, and there could be products that we may not directly see when they are coming through some of the porous borders. There has been a challenge of testing capacity, but we are addressing that, like I've mentioned, and in a few months we should be able to test the products on the market.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Moses, for that wonderful presentation. I would like to move to the people who mine mercury, and that is Mr. Bukia John Bosco, chairperson of the Uganda Association of Artisanal and Small-Scale Miners, also the chairperson, Mubende United Miners Assembly, and the director, Standards Miners and Processors Limited. Mr. Bukia, tell us about how you manage mercury mining, distribution, consumption, and pollution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I am Bukia John Bosco, the chairperson of the Uganda Association of Artisanals and Small-Scale Miners. And maybe to put you right, Mr. Moderator, we don't mine mercury. For us, we are gold miners. We don't mine mercury. So, but we use mercury in our mining processes. I would like to agree.
Hopefully in the future, we might not see you mining the mercury.
We don't intend to.
You don't?
We don't intend to. I would like to agree with my colleagues, both at national level and international levels, that mercury is actually a very dangerous chemical. Much as it has been used in the in the health sector and in the mining sector, but time, I think, has come for us to think positively and see how gradually we can eliminate the use of mercury. I am also happy to note that NEMA has a national action plan which ensures that by 2030, Mercury will be out of use completely. But I also like to appreciate the phased planning, the way things are structured, because we can see gradual phasing out of Mercury. Right now, I'm a practicing miner, and we use Mercury. We cannot deny the fact that we use Mercury, but we don't overpollute the environment. What is happening today? What is happening today? We are moving away from a sector that was so disorganized in the most recent past, and because probably there were intentions to keep us disorganized, but we have now organized ourselves into associations, and we are working with government to make sure that we are operating in accordance to the law. We have been the proponents of the minerals and mining policy, which was approved and assented to by the President. We have also been the proponents of the new minerals and mining bill that was of recent passed by Parliament, pending the assent of the President. And in those laws, it is clear that Mercury will be phased out completely. What we are appealing to government is to look at artisanals and small-scale miners positively. We should run away from the past where the artisanals and small-scale miners were being referred to as the most disorganized group. They don't bathe, they did not study, there are all sorts of things. And I remember we attended one of the meetings where an officer, someone stood up and said, I think artisanals and small-scale miners are a menace to this society. But let's move positively together with government. I appreciate the level of recognition by government through our regulators, the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, because even when you look at the laws, the law that has been passed by Parliament recognizes ASMs as potential investors in future and as a group that can ably contribute to the economic development of this country. If we are properly regulated and managed, I think we shall change the economy of our country. We would like to work closely with NEMA and keep this conversation on. There is a need to mobilize our colleagues across the country. We have done our best working with the civil society organizations, our development partners, to sensitize the miners on the dangers of Mercury. A given percentage that is not even below 70% countrywide are aware of the dangers of Mercury use. Now, what is important now, for us, we look at Mercury as one of the stimulants of our businesses. Can we think of alternatives? This government is for the people. These are the people doing mining, using a chemical that is dangerous to both the miners and probably the communities and the entire country. We need to think together of alternatives that are within the capacities of the ASMs to manage. And also wonder, sometimes I ask myself, where does this Mercury come from?
I was about to ask you, Mr. Buka.
Because for us, Mercury finds us in the mines. It is there and in plenty. But where does it come from? How does it come? Who are those that actually hate us so much that allow the free trade and of these dangerous chemicals? Now, as a practicing miner, my colleagues, the artisanals and small-scale miners, have a feeling that it is Mercury that is effective in amalgamating the gold at the panning level. However, we have tried in some organized mines to control the spillover of the Mercury. These days, through the Uganda Association of Artisanals and Small-Scale Miners, many associations and groups have been licensed. And the licensed miners are expected to operate within the limits of the what? Of the law. We are trying to look at alternatives with development partners, which are also very, very expensive. Some of the alternatives cannot be afforded by artisanals and small-scale miners. To realize this dream of totally eliminating Mercury from this country, government must support the artisanals and small-scale miners with alternatives that are effective and efficient. Otherwise, and also government must come in and stop the Mercury from entering our country. So if we work together, for us as an association that advocates for the rights of the miners, we are a call away from all our miners in the 5 mining regions of this country. We have clustered 5 mining regions: Northern, Moroto, Northern, Karamoja, Eastern, Central, and Western. And we have functional executives in all those regions. We are also trying to organize ourselves so that we are reachable by the respective agencies that are concerned with the reduction of Mercury or total elimination of Mercury in this country. I would have staged a very serious demonstration if they had said that tomorrow we are phasing out Mercury use. No, let's move gradually, regulate, manage well, until such a time when we shall have viable alternatives that are affordable, working with regulators and the National Environmental Management Authority, and we shall have, I think, a Mercury-free country with time. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bukia. And I would like to move to Mr. Bukosi. There's something interesting that he has mentioned, that their organized association has been tagged as a menace. They're disorganized, and it seems there are other people who are disorganizing them, bringing the Mercury to them. Where is the Mercury passing through to get to the miners?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As I earlier alluded, that Uganda is both a fortunate and unfortunate country, that we are a landlocked country. We are a country through which goods destined to different neighbors transit through, and we do have porous borders. And indeed, even some countries that neighbor us are not signatory to the Minamata Convention. So the way they manage Mercury is a bit different from us. Now, given that we have some form of mismanagement, probably mismanagement, I would call it mismanagement of Mercury in some neighboring countries, and the fact that the borders are porous, some of these chemicals, even other goods, not necessarily Mercury, and other Mercury-added products, do find their way into Uganda through the porous. They do not go through the gazetted points. And indeed, I've even mentioned earlier that you don't need a tank load of Mercury to do their work, to do the work of mining. Just need some few drops. And someone can just put it in a pocket, can just put it and just like as a personal guard baggage and go through even the gazetted places. But we've not slept. We have enhanced our systems of surveillance along the borders. We are also sensitizing the public, especially on areas of items that are prohibited, and among them are these Mercury-added products. And we continuously also have a system. Currently, we have what we call a single window platform on which all these institutions can log onto our system and monitor the trade of items, so that in case probably we've not identified or seen the item that is raw coming into the country, they can always tag it and restrict its importation. So with all stakeholders, with all the miners and everybody concerned, I believe we are able to manage Mercury effectively. Thank you.
Mr. Bukia, I want to come back to you. The Executive Director of NEMA, Dr. Kankwasa, mentioned some of the diseases that have affected people in Japan because of the use of mercury. Your small-scale miners, haven't they had similar cases?
Well, to a small extent, some people have been affected because of overuse of mercury. You will see people shaking as if they've taken a lot of alcohol, but not so many people are seen now, but we are also aware that the effects could be within a human being for quite some time, and then after some 10, 15 years, they attack him. So we have not seen serious victims, and we've been working with these civil society organizations. They have monitored more special. We are trying to change our methods of doing things, because after amalgamating gold, we get it as a mercury coated product, and at some stage we burn using gas. Using gas, we burn it and the mercury evaporates. But now we are introducing the use of retorts in our organized mines, so that when you burn it here with gas, it goes through a tube like you are distilling. It does not go into the air, and it is collected at the end of the tunnel, and it can be reused to do the same job. You make sure that you don't overspill. But we need to work together. Like I said, we understand the cause and we support the cause, but we need to work together so that people are not pushed out of business in the name of mercury. Let's look at viable alternatives. I think there is also one area that we have neglected, the area of innovation and research by the land colleagues. You are here. What are you doing? Why can't you do research? Why can't you be innovative and create systems that we can use in our businesses without affecting the environment? Thank you, moderator.
Mr. Muhire, Morris Tabaro, Inspector of Mines, you're the right person to answer this question. What is being done? As an inspector, what are some of the observations that you've made? And what are the way forwards to provide alternatives, viable alternatives?
Thank you, moderator. One thing to remember about our gold mining sector is that compared to the other countries, it's a young and growing sector. So initially, it was characterized by informal activities, and that is maybe why they were characterizing the miners the way they were, because they were used to using low technology and not very capital intensive, and that is where mercury comes in. Mercury is cheaper than other alternatives, and it's less technical to use. So as a ministry, we are still trying every year as the sector is growing to try and sensitize and train our miners to use more environmentally friendly and of course more safe and healthy, more methods which are much more healthier than mercury. We know that there's more than one way to get gold. Mercury actually isn't the most efficient, and there are civil societies which have been trying to teach the miners, and even us who try to promote other alternatives. This is such as borax, and of course there is cyanide use, but cyanide is mostly for large scale. As I mentioned earlier, most of our miners are still small scale. So those are the alternatives we have. But as a ministry ourselves, we have seen that one of the biggest driving forces that we can use to eliminate mercury is to try and push our miners to really to advance, to go out of what we're calling artisanal mining. We want them to grow to small scale and later on to large scale. Of course, the main aim, as the president has always said, is to industrialize the country. And this is what we want to do to our mining sector. We know it can contribute a lot to the economy if we do that. So we encourage them to come together, where the artisanals to come together as groups, especially to be able to manage, as we said, the technical side, but most importantly, the financial side, so that they can afford the costs which come with the licensing, and of course the costs which come with capital investment to invest into more environmental friendly methods, and again, more efficient methods than Mercury. So this is we have projects ongoing now where we're trying to implement this. And one of the most important achievements, of course, is the passing of our bill by Parliament, which happened recently. And it's good to remind the public that once the President assents to this bill, it completely prohibits mercury use in the mining sector. So we know, and we really depend on the gold sector, and we want our miners to grow. So we are going to continue with this project, to sensitize them, to train them, and to encourage them to come together as associations to be able to afford and to do safer mining.
Mr. Bukia would probably contradict with you and say, you're not doing enough.
I know him. Of course, it's not our first time to meet. We've known each other for a number of years now. And there is a very, very significant change in the gold sector. If you were to look at it 5 years ago, if you were to look at Mr. Butcher 5 years ago and the man you're seeing now, he is definitely a different person. Many of the artisanal miners, as they have gained experience, that's the admiration we have with Ugandans. They are growing. The ones who are mining gold, who have stayed in the sector, they are not the same miners of 5 years ago. Maybe 5 years ago they were using mostly water and mercury to pan, but many of them, the ones who have come together, have adopted these methods already. We 100% know that we're going to achieve what we're talking about, because the miners themselves, the ones who experience, the ones who come together, who want to grow businesses, have already adopted these methods and they're using them effectively. Even Mr. Butcher can confess to this.
Morris, you mentioned something earlier on where you said that the gold mining industry is quite young and there is a challenge of financial capital input. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think the financial year 2021-2022, gold was the highest export by Uganda, which kind of indicates that the money is coming in. Is it going into other sectors and not helping the actual miners? What is happening?
If I'm to correct you, yes, I was comparing our sector to other countries. Mm-hmm. And even the closest example I can give is just Tanzania, yeah, with us. Actually, you could find that Uganda as a whole, what we were producing, you find like maybe 2 or 3 companies in Tanzania can compete with the whole country. Okay. That's what I meant by it's growing internationally. Yeah. But locally, as you've said correctly, as I've also said, it's expanding very fast, mm-hmm, that it has even come to surpass other earners of foreign exchange. Mm-hmm. But of course, the challenge, like I mentioned, with these miners is they're growing from a point which was largely informal. And this is what has limited their access actually to finance. We know that the miners have a challenge of accessing credit from financial institutions. And that again comes with what I told you as our projects which we're doing, to try and formalize them, as we call it, so that they can get into associations. And as we formalize them, we know they'll be more compliant and they'll be more transparent in line with the projects that were going on. Yeah. Once they are formalized and transparent, we know that the financial institutions are going to pick interest. We know they already have interest, but it's also always that bureaucracy which stops the partnerships from happening. And as a ministry, we're trying to bridge that gap.
So in other words, they should stop being disorganized.
No, they're no longer disorganized. They are no longer disorganized for sure.
Well, thank you so much for that input, Mr. Muhire Morris. Now, I would like to move to Mr. Robert Tumwesije Baganda, Director, Pro Biodiversity conservationists in Uganda, which is Probico, to tell us, share your experiences in the use of dental amalgam and prerequisites for adoptions in the alternatives that we might use as minors instead of mercury.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll talk on the civil society point of view, and not only dental amalgam, but use of mercury generally. As civil society, we are glad that the government is moving fast to eliminate the use of mercury in Uganda, and the government is moving fast, especially by enacting the laws, the National Environment Act, which talks about sound management of chemicals and how these chemicals should be used. And we are also glad that in East Africa, I think Uganda is the first country to ratify the Minamata Convention, and also the mining bill. I don't know whether you should call it a bill now, because it was passed by Parliament, which also banned the use of mercury in mining. I think on the regulatory point of view, I think we are doing well. I can say maybe we are over 70%. However, there are other laws that need to be revised, like the national oral policy, which talks about this medicine that we take orally, which has the component of the dental amalgam we are talking about. Because the dental amalgam is used especially when you have the tooth problem and you have a hole, and the dentists are feeding it. And as already alluded to, the amalgam is the cheapest, I think, form of feeding the teeth. If you go to the dentist here in Kampala, to most of the suburbs, feeding teeth is around 20,000, especially when you are using the amalgam, which has the mercury. So it is cheap, and I think it is available in most of these, even small clinics, but also in government hospitals, and I think health centers like Health Center Force. So I think it is available now, because as the gentleman from the National Drug Authority said, it is still being imported by both, I think, government and also the private sector, especially those people who are dealing in medicine, supply the pharmacies around the country. So it is still in print, and that's an area that we need to regulate. For example, as we have been talking about now, the phasing down the dental amalgam, and now we are talking about phasing out. And now it is time to revise, for example, the national oral health policy to make sure that, for example, the children who are below the age of 18 don't use these amalgam. And also the pregnant women, because it is more dangerous, especially for the children and also the pregnant women, to use the dental amalgam fillings. So I think we need to revise the policy, but also we need to revise the other laws, especially the dentist, because it is the dentist who know these things, because the ordinary people don't know. And you know, in law they say that he who alleges must prove. But in a sustainable environment management, we talk about a precautionary principle. You do not need to prove that something is dangerous. It is the other person who needs to prove this, that what you are talking about is not dangerous. So now, this is now, the responsibility is now on the dentists, because for them, they know, they have studied these things, they know the appropriate materials that can be used to fill the teeth. And I think they are available, although they are a bit expensive. As I said, for example, we have the resin composite, we have the glass ionomas, and the gold alloys. Some of them are available here, but they're expensive. As I said, they are over 150,000 and above. And if we are filling using the mercury, the amalgam, that one is cheaper, about between 20 to 50,000. So it's affordable by the local person. So I think what we need is a candid conversation with government to subsidize some of these products, because we are not going to say that we are going to ban these cheap materials that are available without subsidizing. So if we are to implement the laws and the policies in the health sector and the mining sector, including the energy sector, they have been talking about the bulbs. We will need to subsidize some of those so that most of those products, so that we phase out actually completely. So, and then for us on our part, as I said, people need to be sensitized. Mr. Butcher, these women, because I've visited the mines, the people who are doing that final panning are women. And even women are the ones who burn using the process you have talked about. So sometimes you find even children in the mines. So we need to work together to sensitize the miners and the women so that they know the dangers, so that they can take precautions. So I think as a country, what we need to do is to do a continuous sensitization, and especially in schools, both at the secondary level. You don't need to be doing dentistry. Be trained to be a dentist to know about these dangers, but even people who are doing other courses, even if we are doing a non-medical course, we need to know about these issues so that we can take precautions. Because as the executive director of NEMA said, the mercury is it is a heavy metal, and I don't want to repeat the dangerous effect they have talked about. But we need to know about these issues. We need to know about these effects so that we work together as a country to eliminate the use of mercury. I think together we can achieve, as the director said, the ED said, by 2030, if we sit down with all these concerned agencies and also concerned citizens and also the private sector, I think we can achieve to eliminate the use of mercury by 2030 in Uganda.
Thank you so much, Mr. Robert Tumwesige Uganda. And if you have just joined us to be part of the conversation, the hashtag is Mercury Management in Uganda. Go to our Twitter pages or Facebook and share your views. It could be a question, it could be a comment, and we have entered our conclusive segment of this dialogue. And I would like to go to the Executive Director of NEMA, Ms. Dr. Bareringa Akankwasa, to give us some conclusive remarks. What is the way forward? What are some of the things that you need to know at home? Doctor.
Thank you very much, our host. I want to thank our partners from various lead agencies, as have talked, from the civil society organizations, from the mining sector, from the standards management, from National Drug Authority, the regulator for medical matters and drugs, and of course from customs. As you've heard, most of the mercury, actually, if not all, actually all the mercury that we use is from outside, because we do not have any known primary mine for mercury in Uganda. And so customs is going to play a very significant role, and I am happy, as you've heard, all the players are very committed, and that's why they are here, and you've heard that they have enabling regulatory instruments that help them to make a contribution to mercury management. I wanted to people through the effects of mercury, just to wrap up the effects of mercury on human health. If you are exposed to mercury, look out for the following. You could lose vision, so there is a likelihood of loss of vision, lack of coordination of movements. You see people staggering when they are not drunk.
impairment of speech, hearing, and walking, muscle weaknesses, tremors. The chairman of the miners talked about people shaking, emotional changes such as mood swings, irritability, excessive shyness. So if you hear people shaking their friends very often, maturity could be a culprit, because you see, maturity affects the central nervous system. The central nervous system is the coordination point of everything. It's the brain we are talking about here. If you have children that have mood swings, that are irritable, and you are associated with, say, mature exposure, you could be having a problem. Insomnia, failure to sleep, neuromuscular changes, including muscle atrophy and twitching, constant headaches, changes in nerve responses, and poor performance on tests of mental function, including effects on IQ. In other words, intelligence, especially children born from mothers that are exposed heavily to maturity. So the list can go on and go on. And like the president of miners said, some of these effects may surface in a long time, because the exposure is not acute pollution, it's not in large quantities, so you may not see these effects immediately, and they may show in a long term. Like in the Minamata case, most of the effects came after 10 years. That's when the Minamata disease was really confirmed and associated with the pollution of the bay that happened in 1950, when this was in the 1960s. And so we may not see the impacts immediately, and our artisanal and small-scale miners should not be happy that the impacts are not prevalent now. It could be work in progress, and we don't want the citizens to first get there. We would have failed in our duty if we waited for the citizens to first show disease before we save them. So our duty is really to save the environment and the human health. So I want to really call upon our colleagues in the mining industry, and I am happy the responsible ministry is doing all possible to build the capacity and also regularize the artisanals, because once the artisanal and small-scale miners are formalized, there is a possibility that they can actually afford better methods. The replacement of diagnostics and other equipments that use mercury. And so I'm not very worried in terms of medical sector, apart from the medical waste. We still have a problem of management of medical waste and solid waste management in general. People still think that you can have your waste burned in your backyard, and you release the smoke, which is a criminal offense, by the way, under our laws. So I want to once again thank our partners. NEMA's role is really to coordinate, supervise, monitor, and regulate. And without the partnership of the respective lead agencies, we cannot manage the environment. We can only manage the environment with the participation of lead agencies, because as we say, the environment is everything. So you cannot have an agency with the capability to manage everything. It's impossible. So we are mere catalysts, we are just coordinators, supervisors, but the real work is supposed to be done by the lead agencies, by the local governments, by the urban authorities, by the civil society, by the private sector, and us combined together, we should be able really to make a difference. We should be able to get to rid Uganda of Mercury by 2030. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akankwasa, for that wonderful closing remark. Right about now, we are going to give a chance to every member of our panel to give their conclusive remarks. And as I move to Anne, there is a question on our Twitter page asking, what is the alternative? If not Mercury, then what can miners use, as you give your conclusive remark?
Thank you very much, Mr. Edrisi, and also for the listener who shared that comment. The alternative to Mercury, or probably before I get to the alternative, Mercury only attracts 40% of gold in a particular concentrate. So the cost of using Mercury actually is higher than what you would benefit. However, the alternatives could be concentrating it. And of course, with concentration, you would need better technology. That's why we are saying that can we work in associations and pool resources together? So the alternatives would require us to concentrate. We have the gravitational method, which depending on the source of gold, if it is from the hard rock or the wetland, it depends on what kind of concentration you have to do. But the technique lies within the concentration of this gold. And then you can actually remove the impurities from whatever you've managed to concentrate using borax, and then you have your gold. However, if you form associations, you can be able to use cyanide, and with cyanide, you need to be regulated by NEMA. Yes, so those are the alternatives that we have. The centrifuges, the shaking tables, like my executive director initially pointed out, those are the alternatives that are used widely, but through regulation. And we're happy to have, having passed the Minerals and Mining Act, or bill. Yeah, we'll be getting support from various direction, development partners, government of Uganda, to transit miners towards use of alternatives. In conclusion, I call upon the various sectors to develop sector-specific mercury pollution control plans and phase-out plans where we already have alternatives, such that NEMA can integrate this into a national plan to reduce mercury pollution and also mercury use, where alternatives do exist. But also the other important one is to immediately address the concern of the vulnerable populations. Just like Probico said, in the health sector, we have the children. You find a child as young as 4 years having dental amalgam in their tooth. So we need to protect that kind of population, the women in the childbearing age, even the women miners. I wish to also inform that in mining, we have about 25 to 45% of women engaging in the actual use of mercury and burning, like the miner has already indicated. So we need to protect this particular population, even as we plan to phase out. For them, we really need to have phase-out dates to limit their exposure to such interfaces. So in conclusion, I call upon government sectors, but even private sector, to come in and help, especially in industry, to come up with pollution reduction strategies with regard to use of mercury as a catalyst and even in the raw material. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anne, for that wonderful remark. Siona Wilberforce Bukosi, Customs Officer, Uganda Revenue Authority. There has been an issue of accessing mercury by miners and other sectors, and we talked about it earlier on, whereby we have porous borders that can't be controlled. What do you say about the way forward?
As I earlier alluded, that indeed our role as customs or as Uganda Revenue Authority is to facilitate trade and indeed facilitate legitimate trade. That trade that which is not legitimate or is illicit, we shall definitely ensure we put in measures to curb it through intelligence-led surveillance operations to ensure that what is or that comes into our country legitimately goes through. As per se, mercury itself is not a prohibited item. It's not a prohibited item to trade. That's why we have it being brought in for the medical as amalgam. And probably we need a strict law. Currently, the East African Customers Management Act, which guides our operations, does not mention mercury per se as a prohibited item, but it is restricted. That means it needs high regulation, how it comes in. And probably we can also have strengthen our post-clearance audits. I mean, if someone has imported mercury, we should follow him up or follow the company up so that we know, is it being put to effective use? That is the way forward. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Booker, John Bosco.
Mr. Presenter, thank you so much. In my concluding remarks, I will request the National Environmental Management Authority to work with us in mobilizing the National Action Plan, which intends to see total elimination of mercury by 2030. We shall support the cause through our structures at regional levels and also work with government, the Ministry of Energy. I don't know that you have a Department of Research and Innovation or a sector, but we need to go that far if we are to really develop this sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Booker. John Bosco. Just to stay with you a little bit, you talked about taking small-scale miners out of business if mercury is totally, probably abolished. What more can the government and other partners do to help the small-scale miners in improving their business, their livelihoods?
Number one is mindset change. We need to make sure that our mining sector, the players in the mining sector, are sensitized towards mindset change. Those that believe that it is only mercury, there are those that still believe that it is only mercury that can work best. But already there are those that think alternatives can also work. There are those that have started putting into practice some of these alternatives, like borax and and cyanide, and it's working. So we need to continue sensitizing, training these miners to make sure that their thinking and thinking towards use of mercury is changed the other way around. Then we shall have a mercury-free country.
And to stick with you a little bit further, you talked about access of mercury by the miners, that it comes to you, you don't know also where it comes from.
Yes.
But how do the miners buy it? Who do they buy it from? Maybe to also help the people at customs.
In the mines, where mercury is used, mercury finds us in our mines. People bring it and sell to us. Some we know, some we don't know. Because for us, our interest is to push our business, buy mercury, go and process your things and get money. But now, I'm tasking government to find out those that bring it to us. Some time back, mercury became business to some civil society organizations. Because it is business, you must talk about mercury and get funding. And at one point, in the Karamoja region, there was no mercury. But about 3-4 years ago, mercury was also imported where? In Karamoja, because they are doing mining without using mercury. Because there was business. Some civil society players were using it as what? Mercury must be everywhere so that business is on. But now that we are planning to phase out, we need to work with them so that that business also the talk about mercury by 2030 closes. Thank you so much.
Indeed, and we hope that that is done. Ms. Patience Sereko, Principal Environment Inspector, NEMA, what are your conclusive remarks on the issue?
Thank you, Moderator. From the discussion we've had, that mercury has, one, it's difficult to take out of the system, and it has basically 3 or 4 pathways. Air, through emissions, on land, through waste management, for example, or in water, through effluent discharges. But also that it can get through onto us through the food web. The fish eats it, and then we eat the fish, and then it accumulates in our bodies, and the effects are chronic. So it's to all of us to now stop the cycle. And it's best stopped from the beginning, because once it gets into one of those pathways, it's difficult to take out. So it is to cut it off such that it doesn't enter into any of those pathways. In the, we talked about waste management, curbing emissions to see that it doesn't get out into the air. We've talked about industry, finding alternatives such that we don't use mercury that may get into the water or into waste. And even in our homes as individuals, we've talked about equipment that has mercury. How are we managing that waste? It's best that you put that waste in the right place where it can be collected and disposed of appropriately. Some of these materials can be recovered and used as raw material in other industry. So it's our responsibility to ensure that mercury does not get into any of the pathways that may lead back to us. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Patience, for that wonderful remark. If you have just joined us, we are talking about management of mercury in Uganda. The hashtag is management of mercury in Uganda. Go to our Twitter account or Facebook and be part of the conversation. You can ask a question, make a remark, or share your experience. Are you a miner? Are you having challenges in using mercury? And as I go to Dr. Moses Akampira, Senior Regulatory Officer, National Drug Authority, there's a question on social media that I've seen, and I think some ladies are asking, what cosmetics should they avoid that probably might have mercury in them? I don't know if you're in a position to answer that question.
Thank you very much. I'll start with the question. As National Drug Authority, we are responsible for the regulation of drugs, and in the legal framework, cosmetics are not covered. I believe that my colleague from the Uganda National Bureau of Standards will be in a better position to comment. But as a takeaway from this discussion as NDA, there is need to strengthen the legal framework with the One Health approach, because as my colleague mentioned from NEMA, the effect of mercury is not actually about human beings alone, but even food-producing animals potentially die from exposure to mercury. But we consume them, and then we also get affected by the mercury exposure in those animals. So there is need really for a concerted approach to eliminating mercury by 2030. But also for the National Drug Authority, the National Drug Policy and Authority Act still schedules mercury containing drugs. One of the examples is preparations that contain mercury to the level of about 0.1%, scheduled under class B, group 2. That means pharmacy-only medicines, meaning that legally there is no bar against importing such a product into the country. So there are actionable steps that can be followed up at a policy level with the National Drug Authority to actually have these products discontinued or phased down or discontinued in the short to medium term. But there's a low-hanging fruit with the dental amalgam. Starting in the next financial year, we'll be implementing the National Drug Policy and Authority registration of surgical instruments and appliances. And like I mentioned earlier, dental amalgam falls there under. And as one of the steps towards phasing out of mercury-containing dental amalgam, the registration of those equipment, because up until today, we are not registering dental amalgam, as is the case for drugs. With the case of drugs, all medicines that you see in the pharmacies have gone through a very extensive registration procedure to allow them into the country. Previously, for dental amalgam, because there was no supporting regulation, we were not able to register it, but we'll be implementing registration, and I believe that's a low-hanging fruit that we could tap into to have the question of dental amalgam with mercury addressed. And then also, like the Executive Director of NEMA mentioned, there are challenges still with disposal of medical waste, and we will be working closely with NEMA on medical waste, and also other actors within the health sector, like the National Medical Store, which is responsible for distribution of all pharmaceuticals across the public sector in the country, to ensure that the waste is actually returned back if, for instance, it expires, if expired drugs, expired instruments, and other things are destroyed appropriately at facilities which are approved by NEMA for that purpose. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Doctor, for that wonderful conclusive remark. I will move to Mr. Mnyegera Geoffrey Moses, Standards Officer, UNBS. The question I've been told that you are in a better position to answer. The ladies are asking, what cosmetics should they avoid that have mercury in them?
Thank you, moderator. I don't want to answer the question so specific, but we usually tell the consumers out there that they need to be vigilant while going for shopping. They need to look at the labels on these products. Now that you're talking mercury, it is an item you should look out so strictly from this moment on. I can submit on that as that. Yes, but on behalf of UNBS, we are on to the deadline of 2030. We are going to continue developing the standards in the interest of protecting the environment and the consumer. I submit and thank you. I'm glad we are here. Thank you.
So UNBS, what's the way forward? What are some of the things that we should expect from you as an organization in curbing this issue? A little more detail on that issue, on that aspect.
Thank you, moderator. UNBS is mandated to develop standards, promote them, to facilitate trade, fair trade, to promote our local industries. So like I've just submitted, we are going to continue into the business of standards development, revisions of these standards, and then the declarations of the standard as mandatory, because if you're looking at the aspects of health, consumer protection, we are looking at the aspects of environment, then they should be mandatory. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Muhire Morris Tabaru, Inspector of Mines, what is your conclusive remark?
Thank you. Thank you for this platform. We want to say that to the public that, and also especially to some of our major stakeholders who are the artisanal miners in gold, is that the vision, one of the parts of the vision of our ministry is to use natural resources for socio-economic development. And that means that we shall do everything within our authority to make sure that the miners, their lives not only improve economically, financially, but we shall make sure they also improve physically, health-wise. And those are the projects we are pursuing, and those are the angle we shall take. And also maybe, while I have this platform, is also to encourage other Ugandans who don't know much about the mining sector, is to get involved. One big improvement we've had in the past is we are now doing an online licensing, e-licensing system, which means that people can apply for and can be given a license to mine gold completely online. They can do this straight from their phones. So if you're interested, especially maybe you want to come in as for this specific scenario, if you want to come in to finance the artisanal miners, because we now actually have a big body of experienced gold miners, and as you've heard from the chairman, they are actually very willing. We have seen them to change. They know the dangers. One of the challenges they have is finances. And I know that Ugandans are out there, some want to make investments. They can visit our website, dgsm.go.ug, or they can visit our head office near the Zoo in Entebbe, and let them get involved. As you can see what NEMA is doing, this is a multi-stakeholder problem which can only be solved if we work together. So more Ugandans need to get involved in mining.
Thank you so much for that remark. Dr. Robert Tumesije Baganda, what is your conclusive remark on this issue?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm not Dr. Mr.
Oh, sorry. I had upgraded you.
Three things. One is financing. I'm told that there is a section in the Mining Act of a mineral fund. If this mineral fund is actualized, I think part of the money should go to management of Mercury. Then second, we need to keep on awareness raising and to the population so that we can work together to phase out Mercury. And then lastly, we need to do biostudies. I've been talking about this biostudies by the academic institutions so that we know what is killing our people, especially the increased cancers in the country. We do not know what is causing these cancers, but we need these biostudies so that we have a track record of what is killing our people. So when people know what is killing us, we'll be able to manage these chemicals, not only Mercury, but all other chemicals that are affecting our health. Otherwise, we need to work together as a country so that we can manage this Mercury and phase it out by 2030. Thank you very much.
Not doctor, but Mr. Has there been a challenge in partners coming together to create this kind of awareness that you're talking about? Have organizations and probably the government been hesitant?
There has not been a challenge, but I think we need to bring together, especially the private sector. We need to bring them on board. And then, as I said, we need to work with the dentists and the training institutions so that we increase this awareness. And I think that will be important. And there is another thing that has been talking about where this Mercury comes from. I think we know where it comes from. This Mercury, we know that it comes from these countries such as India, China, but it passes through the porous borders like Kenya, DRC. But we have the East African Customs Act. So maybe if these countries also ratify it, will be hard. But otherwise, as the miner said, you find kilograms and kilograms of this Mercury in these sites. And when you go to URA, they don't capture it in their records because it doesn't pass by their borders. So we need to, when we're working together, it will be easy to manage, especially the proliferation of this Mercury coming to the country. So that is awareness we are talking about.
Yeah.
Because people don't know the dangers, maybe they don't mind about. But if they know the dangers, then the inspectors and also the buyers and users will be part of eliminating this problem.
Thank you so much. And probably because the effects are slow to manifest, people are not much eager to go out and ask what are the dangers of mercury. And before we conclude this dialogue, I would like to go back to the Executive Director, NEMA, Dr. Barirenga Akankwasa. At least he's a doctor. You know, I'm surrounded with so many doctors. Everyone is becoming a doctor. Doctor, the panelists, each of them have been talking about creating awareness, awareness, awareness. It's quite an important aspect in trying to eradicate the pollution of mercury by 2024. What are the plans towards that?
Yes, thank you very much. Awareness is a continuous thing, and part of our work as NEMA is continuous raising of awareness about the need to conserve the environment, and sound management of chemicals is now a global issue. We've just come out of United Nations Environment Assembly, and one of the resolutions adopted is on sound management of chemicals. And so NEMA, for us, we are very ready to continuously raise awareness, and part of this effort is this conversation we are having now. We have started with the lead agencies. We shall go to the grassroots and continuously raise awareness amongst the citizens, amongst the miners at the local level, partnering with the regulators and the associations. Of course, the best way to raise awareness is to use the regulated society itself. And we are happy that we have full participation and endorsement of the chairperson of artisanal and small-scale miners, and these efforts are going to continue. We shall do awareness using conventional means, like we are using now. We are on TV. We shall go on radios. We are going to go on radios across the country in targeted areas like Mubende, Karamoja, this place, Buhweju, and other areas where there is excessive use of mercury in mining. And we are going to be on radio targeting these areas. But we shall also continue our routine environment awareness through social media platforms and through barazas and direct outreach. We're also partnering with the church. We want to use the clergy as they deliver the gospel of faith. They should also deliver the gospel of environment management. So we are not going to leave anybody behind. We shall use all approaches to reach all stakeholders to ensure that we live a healthy, clean, and productive environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barirenga Akankwasa, Executive Director, NEMA. And thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, on the panel. Such a very interesting and informative conversation we've had today. But I'll say, if there is anything that you want to say before we are out of this dialogue, please, this is the time. Mr. Buke, I feel you have something to say.
I would have had a lot, but time is actually not on our side. But
I can give you 5 minutes if you have something.
No, I only need one.
Perfect.
I will urge all stakeholders here present to continue working together in the fight against escalated use of mercury, and also follow the action plan so that by 2030 there is complete non-mercury use in all our mining activities. But also request NEMA to decentralize some of your services. Because when we apply for environmental impact assessment certificates, sometimes the terms of reference take longer periods to get out of your offices. I think it's because of the workload. But if you had decentralized, we know in the central region we have, in eastern we have, in northern we have, where we can go as miners and get EIA certificates, I think that one would also be good. like the ministry is beginning to decentralize. They have now functional regional officers on ground. Thank you very much.
All right.
Have
Thank
I
you so
exceeded a minute?
Yes, 1 minute, but the executive director has a response for you.
Yes, it's only fair that we have a right of response. We take the feedback in good faith, and we want to thank you for this feedback. We are working towards continuous improvement. Very soon you will not need to walk to NEMA offices to make your submission or get your certificate. We are automating application, processing, and issuance of environment and social impact assessment certificates and licenses. For now, you can apply to get your TORs by email, and you can receive the results by email without going to any office. That's already working. We also have regional offices, but we are continuously working towards strengthening them. We have a regional office in Mbale, we have a regional office in Lira, we have a regional office in Mbarara, and we have a regional office in Masindi, and then the Kampala headquarters. And we are looking towards having a regional office in West Nile and Karamoja area. So it's work in progress. We appreciate that the workload is quite big. The mandate we have is not synonymous with the resources and the capabilities that we have, but we are working towards improvement and continuous improvement. And we hope that once we automate, you should be able to get a certificate from your phone, which you can authenticate online with either a QR code, a barcode, or a document verification number. So you won't need to walk to NEMA or to walk to any office. Very soon, you should be able to get these services in the comfort of your office or home.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We've come to the end of our dialogue on mercury management in Uganda. And for you who is at home and probably have missed this discussion, don't worry. Go to our YouTube channel, that is NTV Uganda, and you'll be able to catch up on the conversation, this quite important conversation. And remember, you can still share your views. The conversation does not stop here. Go to our Twitter account and Facebook account. Look out for NTV Uganda and look out for any of the organizations that have been represented here today. Their social media platforms are available to answer you the questions that you have towards mercury and the effects, the benefits. How can you use it safely, or what is the way forward as a country towards the pollution of mercury in the country? But right about now, I would say goodbye and have a lovely weekend.